Do you ever get that feeling that your childhood just ended a little too soon? Like you were the responsible one before you even really knew what that word meant? Well, today we're going to get into the psychology behind that exact feeling. We're breaking down how and why some kids end up becoming adults long before they're supposed to.
And this right here, this quote, it's often where the whole thing starts. It's not always some big dramatic event. A lot of the time, it's just this slow, quiet dawning, this realization that someone has to step up and be responsible.
And that leads us to this first idea, the quiet outgrowing. This is about that exact moment. It's when a child looks around and realizes that if they don't take charge, nobody will. And so they just quietly step into a role that was never, ever meant for them.
So, where does this all come from? What are the actual roots of taking on all that responsibility so early? Let's dig into how this all begins, deep down in our psychological wiring.
Okay, so the core concept here has a name that psychologists use, parentification. And as you can see, this isn't just about doing a few extra chores around the house. Oh no, it's about being forced to manage really complex adult emotions, a job that a kid's brain just isn't built to handle yet.
So how in the world does a developing brain cope with that kind of pressure? Well, it learns a really powerful and pretty costly lesson. To keep everything from falling apart, your own feelings have to get pushed down, put in a box. It's a survival skill, learned early and learned deep.
This slide just lays out the two paths so clearly. On one side, you've got a supported childhood where you learn it's okay, it's safe to need other people. But on the other side, you've got a parentified childhood where you learn that you're the one everyone else has to lean on. And those two experiences, they shape your entire nervous system in fundamentally different ways. So these early experiences, they lead to what we can think of as survival adaptations. And it is so crucial to see these not as flaws or problems, but as really brilliant coping strategies that were developed to handle a tough situation. We're going to walk through 6 of these core adaptations one by one so we can really understand how they tend to show up in adult life.
Let's start with a question that might feel really familiar to some of you. Why do you handle everything by yourself, even when you know you shouldn't have to? This feeling, it has some incredibly deep roots.
This is what we're calling survival independence. Basically, because that consistent support just wasn't there when you were a kid, you learn not to even ask for it. So now, as an adult, you might be the most capable person in the room, but you find it almost impossible to let anyone else really help carry the weight. All right, how about this one? That really strange feeling of being wise beyond your years, but at the same time, feeling kind of empty or unfulfilled on the inside. Psychology actually has a term for this, split maturity. It's when your development gets uneven. The responsible, wise parts of you are put on the fast track, but the parts that needed to learn how to receive care and just feel safe, they got skipped. And this creates that gap between how serious and put together you seem on the outside and how confused or unfulfilled you might actually feel on the inside.
Just think about this for a second. For a lot of people, rest isn't relaxing at all. It's actually a source of major anxiety. What in the world is behind that?
This brings us to uneasy rest. See, if your childhood taught you that calm was just the quiet before the storm, your nervous system literally learned to stay on high alert, 24/7. So as a result, stillness feels dangerous, and you might only feel okay when you're actively doing something useful. And this leads us right into our next adaptation. It all revolves around this question. Do you ever feel guilty just for needing something from someone else? It's an incredibly common feeling. This is guilt for needing. It's this deep down internalized belief that if you're being taken care of, you must be a burden to someone. So what do? You might find yourself downplaying your own problems or even apologizing for having needs in the first place, all because the act of receiving help just feels so wrong. And what about this paradox? Having an almost psychic ability to read other people's emotions, but at the same time keeping your own under lock and key. We call this guarded empathy. To survive, you had to become an expert at reading a room and anticipating what everyone needed. But you also learned that caring that deeply comes at a cost. So you develop this incredible empathy, but you keep it behind a protective wall, just to keep yourself from being completely drained. Okay, so with all of these adaptations in mind, what does the path forward even look like? Well, the perspective here is actually incredibly powerful and really hopeful. If you take away just one thing from all of this, please let it be this. You are not broken. These traits are proof of your strength. They are evidence of a nervous system that brilliantly figured out how to handle immense pressure when you were young. This isn't a story about being damaged. It's a story about resilience.
And that brings us to the ultimate shift in perspective. Healing isn't about becoming weak or dependent. No, it's about recognizing that the emergency is finally over. It's about giving yourself permission to put down all that weight, to feel safe in the quiet, and to understand that you are finally allowed to just rest.
So, I'll leave you with this one last question to think about. If you grew up responsible for way more than any child ever should be, is that a weight you're still carrying around with you today?